Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to a tutorial on how to set up your computer to do Android game development using Unity 3D. This tutorial is mostly going to follow the Windows side of things. However, the Mac process is actually remarkably similar, although quite a bit simpler actually, so we'll address those differences as we come to them. Now, of course, Unity does have the ability to build a game for multiple different platforms: Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, etc., etc., etc. However, for several of those, you need some additional tools, and an Android is an example of that. You won't actually be able to build an Android application unless you have the Android software development kit installed on your computer, which also requires the Java development kit. So we're going to go through this entire process of setting everything up bit by bit so that in the end you can build a game in Unity for the Android mobile platform, so a tablet or a phone, for example. Now, I'm running this inside of a virtual machine just to make sure that I've got a completely blank environment. That might lead to a couple of weirdness here and there, but hopefully it will be okay. So here's the step-by-step process. We're going to start off by installing the Java development kit. This allows you to create and compile Java applications, which are required for the Android environment. We're also going to install the Google USB driver, which allows your computer to recognize your Android device when you plug it in. Note that you will not need to do this step, as far as I know, on a Mac. Finally, we will install the Android Studio. Now, technically, there's also just a plain Android software development kit, which is a bit of a smaller download, but the Android Studio package includes that, plus a few extra things, so we may as well get the whole package down there. And then finally, we're going to go into Unity 3D and make sure that it's configured to properly use the Android SDK. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is look up a few things to download. The Java Development Kit, or JDK, you can basically just look that up directly and find the website. Now note that this is different from the Java runtime environment. The JRE is what you need to run Java programs. However, you need the JDK to actually compile and create your own Java programs, which is what we need here. If you check the description box down below, I will try to have download links for all of those things. As I understand it, you need the development kit version 7 or greater to do Android development. The current version appears to be version 8, and at the time of this video, it'll be sub-version 40 of those, but you know, whatever you get is probably going to be perfectly fine. I'm running on the 64-bit version of Windows 7, so I would be downloading this Windows X64 version of it. Just make sure you've got the right one for your version. You'll also have to hit this accept license agreement before you can download it. Once you've got that downloaded, we're going to pop over to our downloads folder over here and find it there. We're going to double click on that and get it started. Installing the application is relatively straightforward, but there's one very, very important thing that you have to note during the install, and that's the location of the development kit on your computer. So if we go ahead and we get this started, we're going to hit next. This next screen, we choose what parts of the GDK to install. We may as well leave everything on. That's perfectly fine. And here's the important part. This location where the software is going to be installed, you have to make a note of this. So it's going to be kind of important later on. You want to be able to keep track of this. You can, of course, change the location if you want. Maybe you just want to go to C:/GDK or something like that. That might be fine. The default location is perfectly fine as long as we remember it. So on my computer, it's going to be C, program files, Java, GDK, and then the version number after that. I'm going to go ahead and next. It's going to process through this. After it's done processing this, because this is a fresh install of the computer, it will also install the JRE, the Java Runtime Environment. So we'll get another window in just a moment here. This will probably run even faster on your computer because you're probably not running in a virtual environment like I am here. Just going to let it finish off. Actually, while it's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and open a new Explorer window over here. I'm actually going to go to my computer. I'm going to go to my C drive over here. I'm going to go to Program Files. This is where this is going to be installed. And I'm going to go into the Java folder. You can see the GDK is being installed there. Just going to wait for the next bit to finish. There we go. The new window has come up. This is to install the Java Runtime Environment, JRE. This is what lets you run Java programs. It's going to be installed in some location. We don't have to note this, but by default, it does put it in the same root folder as the GDK, which is fine. We just have to remember these are two separate acronyms here and not to get confused between the two. So that'll just take a moment to set up, and then we're going to run a couple of tests to make sure that everything is set up properly. And you're going to want to do this on your end as well, just to ensure that everything is hunky-dory. Just give it one more moment here. All right, now that it's done, I'm going to go ahead and close the installer. Now I'm going to open up a command line window just to make sure that everything is working okay. If you're on the Mac, the easiest way to do this is to hit the command key, or hold down the command key and hit space, then type terminal and hit enter, and that'll load up the terminal. If you're on Windows, if you click the start button over here, again, if you're on Windows 7 or I think Vista and Windows 8 is going to be relatively similar. If you hit the Windows button and then you type in the search here, command prompt, you will find it there. Alternatively, and this is my favorite, I like to hold down the Windows key and hit R, and then in the window that pops up here, you can type CMD. Either way is exactly the same. It will get you to this window over here. So we're going to check that two things are installed properly. The very first thing we're going to do is type Java. This will try to execute the Java runtime environment, and it should give you this sort of complaint. It should say, okay, well, you need to specify some things, but this points out that Java is properly installed on our system. We could currently execute Java applications. However, what we then need to check is, do we have access to Java C? This is the Java compiler. This is what takes your source code and converts it into an actual Java application. And if we try that, we'll see a complaint that the computer doesn't know what Java C is. It doesn't recognize this as a valid command. If you are on the Mac, at this point, Java C should work for you. However, on Windows, by default, the installer doesn't put the development kit on your path. The path is the list of locations, the command line, the system in general, will search for an executable. So we're going to go ahead and add that to our path. It'll make life a lot simpler if we just do that now. So let's go ahead and close this command line window. And so we know the location. If we go ahead into, again, on my computer, it's C, Program Files, Java, the GDK, the development kit. And in there's a folder called bin, binary files, or executables, you can think of it that way. And we can see here there's a Java C program right there. So what we have to do is add this file location here. If I click in the location bar, I want to add this to my path. So I'm going to copy this. Now, the easiest way to do this on Windows 7, like I am now, and on most recent versions of Windows, is to right-click on your My Computer icon, which you can also do on your desktop, for example, right? Actually, never mind, I don't have it on my desktop. If you open Explorer, if you have an Explorer window open like this, on the computer over here, you can right-click on it and just choose Properties, or from your Start menu, you can right-click on Computer. Again, just choose Properties, and that's going to be perfectly fine. In the window that comes up, you're going to look for something called Advanced System Settings. We're going to click there. And then in the window that pops up there, we're going to make sure we're on the Advanced tab, and we're going to go down to Environment Variables. One of the things under System Variables will be called the path. So this is the location of everywhere that tries to be executed when you type something from a command line, or just generally trying to access it overall. If we double click on this line, or with it selected, you can also just click Edit. That will open a dialog box here with System Variables, so for the path. And it's got a bunch of locations in here that you'd scroll around. It doesn't matter what's in here. What we're going to do is we're going to click inside of here. We're going to hit the N key on our keyboard to go to the end. We're going to put in a semicolon to separate it from the other. And then we're going to make sure that where we have, do I still have that window open? Right here. My window here, I want to take this command, this location here, C, Program Files, Java, JDK, bin. And again, it might be slightly different on your computer. I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it by hitting Control-C, or you can right-click and hit Copy. And then I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go back to the end by hitting the End key, and I'm going to paste it in with Control-V, or again, you can right-click and hit Paste. So I'm going to paste this at the end of my path. I'm going to hit OK, then OK, then OK one more time. And now if I open up my command line one more time, and I type Java C, now it successfully finds Java C. It doesn't do anything, but it's confirming that our path is set up correctly to run Java. The very next step we're going to do is we're going to install the Google USB driver. This lets your Windows computer talk to your Android device that is plugged in via USB. Again, I believe on the Mac you should not have to do this. This should be a Windows only step. So again, if we go into our browser and do a search for Google USB driver, it should bring up the website right away. Again, if you check the description box down below, I'll try to have the links there. But if you click on that, you'll be brought to a page where you can download the USB driver right over here, get it down onto your computer, and then install that. I'm not going to install it on my computer on here because this is my virtual machine. I'm never going to be plugging in an Android device there, and I'm not sure the USB driver will work properly anyway, but I do have it installed on my actual computer. So make sure you have that plugged in. The next thing we actually have to do that I forgot to add a bookmark in here for is to enable developer mode on your Android device. Actually, should have remembered that a little bit sooner, but I was just focused on the computer setup. And if you go ahead and make a search for this, you should find a page that will give you a variety of instructions. It partially depends on what version you have. Generally speaking, it's going to involve going into your settings menu. Let's see if one of these is actually sensible. Probably this one here from the Android site. I'm sorry, I should have had this prep. Enable on-device developer options. There we go. There we go. So enable USB debugging on your device. This is the actual step you're going to want to take on your device, which I can't show here in this video. But for newer systems from Android 4 and above, it's slightly more complex than the older ones. For the older devices, you could just go into your settings, applications, and then development. On newer machines, you actually have to unlock it. As of 4.2, it's hidden. You go to settings, about your phone, and then at the bottom of the list, at least on my device, it was at the bottom of my list, there's going to be an entry called build number. You tap it 7 times. And then it will unlock the ability to enable developer options, and then it'll be in this menu. So it's a couple of little hidden steps, but you're going to want to turn that on so that you can get some additional debugging. I don't believe you need to do this to do Android application development, but it opens up a lot of really cool possibilities. So it's a really, really, really good thing to do. Anyway, moving back to the general theme, now we need to do the next step, which is to install the Android Studio. So again, you can do a search for that phrase, Android Studio, or you could simply look up the Android SDK as well, because they are slightly different. Android Studio comes with a full development environment, plus a few extra tools that is very handy. That's why I'm going to recommend you may as well just go ahead and do this, and it'll set up your SDK for you. So if we go ahead and search for that, we can see the download Android Studio link now. For me, it'll default to Windows. Download that and get that onto your system. And then once you've got that in your download folder, we're going to double click on it. And again, just like with the Java install, there's going to be a very important step that you're going to have to pay attention to a path. Now, there's 2 things that are going to be installed by all this. The first thing is going to be the Android Studio itself. And that doesn't matter where it gets put, and you don't have to pay attention. However, within this setup environment, there's also going to be a path for the Android SDK, and that's very, very important to note down, and is in fact a little bit tricky because by default, it gets installed in a hidden folder, so it can be a little bit counterintuitive to find, but we'll look at that. So here's the Android Studio setup. It's going to install Android Studio as well as the Android SDK, which is very important. That's exactly what we're looking for. It also enable Android virtual devices, which is to say your computer can actually run like a fake emulated version of an Android device. I think by default, if you have this on, it'll come set up to emulate a Nexus 5, but it can actually emulate a wide slew of different devices. However, as a Unity developer, this is not super useful for you just because the emulation is relatively slow and limited and can't really run full Unity 3D games to the quality that you might expect. It's a little tricky to configure that, but as a regular Android application developer, it could be very, very useful. So we're going to leave all 3 of those on. We're going to accept the license agreement. Now, this is the screen that's really, really important. This first path, this is where the Android Studio itself will be installed. This path doesn't really matter too much. This next one, though, is the one that is absolutely critical because we're going to have to tell Unity where this is. And furthermore, we're going to want to add part of this to our path so that we have access to some cool command line tools as well. So by default, it installs it within your user profile. So for me, it would be C users Quill 18 app data local Android SDK. What's tricky here is this app data folder inside of your user profile is hidden by default, so it can be a little hard to find. So I recommend at this point is actually to just grab this, copy it, and then paste it in a notepad file like that so that you can remember where it is later on, and it'll make things a little bit easier. But you can also find it later. Also, you could just change the location. For example, you might want to just change it to something like C/Android SDK. That might be a good idea too. All right, hit next. You can install in the default, and it'll take a moment to install. I'm going to come back after it's done doing that. Okay, so now the installation of Android Studio has completed. We can hit next. By default, it will ask to start Android Studio next. We don't have to do that. If you do, it's likely to run a bunch of updates and maybe get some additional newer versions of the Android SDK, which is fine. But for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and skip that step. I don't believe we will need to do that. Now, at this point, we want to find that SDK location, make sure that everything installed correctly. So let's go ahead. Let's do the full process. We know it's on computer, C, and again, on my setup, I left the default, which meant it went into users, Quill 18, and then a folder called app data. And you can see, well, in fact, you can't see. There's no app data folder in this list. And the reason is that folder is hidden by default. Now, you can still access it. There's two ways you can do it. First of all, if I wanted to, I can click on the location bar over here and just put in /app data and hit enter, and I will be in that folder, and then I can keep going to local Android SDK. The alternative, if I go back to my profile, is I can go, if I just tap Alt and get my little toolbar over here, I can go Tools, Folder Options. Then in Folder Options, I can hit the View tab and put in the Show Hidden Files, Folders, and Drives option, which will let me see the app data folder as well. Again, this is just a default location. You don't have to install the SDK to there, but it's perfectly fine if you do. Android SDK. All right, so it is installed. That is wonderful. Before we continue, though, there is a really, really useful tool included in this that you probably want on your path. Under the Platform Tools subfolder, there is a executable here called ADB, the, I guess, Android debugger tool. And this tool is part of the reason why we went and enabled the developer mode on your Android device. Or rather than developer mode, debugger mode might be the more correct term. So we want to be able to run this from the command line. And if we check right now, if we go to the command line and we try to type that in, we can see we don't know that. So we once again have to go and alter our path. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in my location bar over here. I'm going to grab this whole folder. That's the Platform Tools folder, not just SDK, but the actual Platform Tools one. I'm going to hit Control-C to copy that. Then I'm going to right-click on Computer. I'm going to go to Properties, Advanced System Settings, the Advanced tab, Environment Variables. I'm going to find the path again. I'm going to double-click on that line. I'm going to hit end. I'm going to hit a semicolon. It's very important to have that in there. And then I'm going to paste in that SDK Platform Tools path and hit OK, then OK, then OK. Now, if I try to type ADB again, it still won't tell me it recognizes the location. That's because the path in your command prompt doesn't get updated unless you start it over again. So we're going to close the command prompt. Then I'm going to once again go to my start menu here and type in command. Or again, and I actually prefer this quite a bit, if you hit Windows R, you can type in CMD. And if you're on a Mac, you can always hit Command Space and then Terminal, and then open up your terminal and verify that everything runs okay. Again, I think on the Mac, all these paths will be correct. Now, if we try ADB, we get a list of different tools. At some point, we will probably talk about ADB at least a little bit. We'll probably look into the push command that lets you copy a file to your device, the ability to list your devices. As well, you can actually record video from your device using this tool, which is really, really handy. But at this point, we've got the full Android development environment configured. If you just want to be a regular Android application developer, you could do that at this point, because you could write your applications in Android Studio. They would be compiled because you have the Java development kit, and you'd have the ability to copy them to your Android device because your USB driver would be properly configured. And you'd even be able to do your debugging because you have all your developer mode enabled. But the very final step is going to be to tell Unity where the Android SDK is. That way, in Unity, you can actually build your Android device. So with that, I'm actually going to flip over to my actual computer here and show you where you set that in Unity. So now I'm in Unity. I've gone ahead and just created a blank project just so that I can get into the main interface here. And what you want to do is you want to go to the Edit menu and choose Preferences, then External Tools, and then the line here, Android SDK Location, is the important one. You're going to click on there. It'll open a file selection window, and you're going to make sure that it's pointed to the SDK root folder. Unlike the path that we set up in the last step, you don't have to point it to the platform tools. You just have to point it to the SDK folder itself. On my actual computer, this location is C users Martin, because this bit here will be your user name on your system. So for me, it's C users Martin app data local Android SDK. The content of your folder should look like this, and this is the folder that you want to select. So we're just going to go ahead and select that folder. It'll have that, and now if you were to try to build a project for the Android device, it should successfully be able to build that project. And in fact, it can even push it out to your device. When you go to your build settings, oops, which is on the wrong screen, if you pick Android, if you build it, it should be able to compile it at this point, successfully build it, and create a .apk file for you, which you can then manually convert or transfer with your Android if you want, or you can click Build and Run, in which case Unity will automatically transfer that file to your Android device if it's plugged in and if you have everything properly configured on your computer, and it will actually run the program on the Android at the same time. However, if you do this, in fact, right now, it might even go and give you an error. It'll ask you for location. So let's go builds, and let's call this Android test. I think it'll complain about one extra error. Maybe not, because I'm not doing a build and run. I might be wrong about that. But it should ask you to set a like an application name. Just curious to see if it'll actually give me the error or not. It's taking a long time to for Unity to get some of this stuff done, despite the fact that it's an empty project here. There are no assets to build. There are no reflection probes. What are you doing, Unity? You're holding things up. Android SDK detection. This step will fail if you don't have your path set correctly, or if you don't have your SDK properly installed on your computer. There we go. This is the error I was talking about. Bundle identifier has not been set up correctly. Please set the bundle identifier in the player settings. Must follow the convention of com.yourcompany.name.yourproductname. So if we go and look at that, it'll automatically bring up the player settings. You can also do it if you click on, say, Android and then click player settings. It'll bring up this, this entry in the inspector. And if we scroll down under other settings, you can see identification, bundle identifier. It'll complain if you haven't changed this. So for me, my proper bundle name would be something like quill18 productions.android test. And that should be all you have to do. And at this point, the build should succeed. But because it takes so long, I'm not going to go ahead and ask it to do that again. And obviously, there's lots of settings there. But we'll look into more of this in future videos. I think that covers everything you need to know. I think at this point, you can build your Unity project. You can take your existing Unity project and build it for the Android device. And it should immediately run on that system. Obviously, if you've built it for, say, the PC or for a console device with a controller, then you might have to make some changes to your input systems to properly represent how you interface with a touchscreen. But other than that, it should actually just run on that device, which I think is pretty cool. I also like the fact that you don't have to actually, there's no special licenses, no special developer setup for Android. You can just sort of build and test right away and see that things are working okay. There will be more videos on Android development coming soon. Specifically, there will be videos that are centered around the Project Tango special vision Android device that we're going to look into very, very soon now. Thanks for watching, folks. If you did enjoy this video, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments or email me at quill18@quill18.com. And really, if you don't want to miss a video, make sure to subscribe to my channel here at youtube.com/quill18creates. And drop a like if you have to. Thank you very much. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.